so we are live. Hello, everybody. This is Constance from Mysterious Galaxy. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I am really excited for our event that we have tonight. We have Gregorio, Jessica Kim, and Katherine Kottaras. And I am going to go ahead and let them take it away. They are going to introduce their books, answer questions, and we're just going to have a really fun time. So enjoy. Make sure if you have questions for the event that you start commenting down, and I'll pass them along to our authors. And yeah, have a good event, guys.
Thank you, Constance.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Eileen. I'm IW Gregorio, and this is my Brain in Love. It's my second book baby, and I'm so excited to be here with you virtually. I was really wanting to be with you there in person, and I guess this is just a small consolation gift because I adore these ladies so much. I'm so happy to at least see their smiling faces and be able to shriek with them about bookish things and food and comedy and all the good things in life. This is My Brain in Love is my second novel. My first one is None of the Above. And my publisher likes to pitch this as a happy book about mental illness. But my favorite description so far has been that it's a foodie rom-com, which is like my newest favorite subgenre. So that's pretty exciting. So Kathy, I know because we debuted in the same year, and her book, How to Be Brave, is just like such a super size positive book, dealing with, but also complex, dealing with grief and obviously family relationship. And fun fact, the thing that ties us all together is that all of our books feature restaurant families. So we're definitely going to talk about food, okay? So Kathy, and then of course Jess Kim. I was gonna do later, but I'll do now. So Jess Kim wrote Stand Up, Yumi Chung, which I think my daughter actually took with her back to her room because she had to come here to give her fan moment with Jessica, which was kind of like a K-pop like reaction, and it was very exciting because Stand Up, Yumi Chung is one of her favorite books, and mine and my husband's as well.
Thank you.
Jessica, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jessica Kim, and I'll show you the book. I have it here. I'm the lone middle grade author on panel today. This is my debut novel. It came out really recently, March 17th. So brand spanking new, coronavirus new. And do I give a spiel about what it's about?
Yes, please.
Oh. So it's called Stand Up, Yumi Chung, and it's about an 11-year-old girl named Yumi Chung, who's a little bit shy. She's a little awkward, but the thing about Yumi is she really loves comedy, and specifically stand-up comedy. And the problem is her parents do not. So they don't understand her love of comedy, and they actually would prefer that she spend her time studying for the big scholarship test she has coming up. To qualify her for a full ride at the fancy private school she's going to. So it's just a really fun, fast-paced book with a lot of humor and heart. Readers get to go along as Yumi accidentally steals someone's identity and to attend comedy camp run by her YouTube idol. And it's got a lot of like LA vibes. It's a SoCal book, and it's set in Koreatown, gentrifying Koreatown, Los Angeles. And it's a family story, and it's also a story about identity and being a child of immigrants and kind of finding and loving who you are. So that's my book. And Stand Up, Yumi Chung.
Kathy actually has two books I guess you can talk about.
Hi. First of all, congratulations to you both. I'm so excited for your books, and thank you for having me here. I was so excited to come down to San Diego and hang out with you today. There was this alternate universe where we're all hanging out in a room together, but I'm so excited we get to see each other like this. And congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
And I didn't bring my physical copies of my books. I ran before and I grabbed it. I looked to see if I have them on my shelf. They're not on my shelf. I think my daughter took them in her room. But yeah, I have two books. The first one is called How to Be Brave, and I'll talk about that one. The second one's The Best Possible Answer. And the first book was inspired. My cat's coming in. Was inspired partly, I've been thinking about it a lot recently. My father passed away when I was 17, and it was inspired by, and then my mother passed away when I was 30, and I really started writing after my mom passed away. My daughter had just been born, and I started imagining what conversations with my dad would have been like had he lived and had my mom passed away first. He was older, Greek, an immigrant, and we had such a loving bond, and yet there were those moments where maybe he didn't really understand his American daughter. And so it's really about that relationship, but also about the narrator, Georgia, the main character. She sets a list for herself of ways to be brave, because her mother wrote a letter telling her to go out and live life. She knew she was dying. And it was very much how my parents raised me, to understand our history, but also look forward and find ways to really live life. So I love that book because for me, it was a way for me to work through my own grief at having lost both my parents, but also in moments like these where everything is in crisis and we're in this intense moment, to remember those stories and to remember those struggles and to really celebrate these moments, right, of celebration where you're giving birth to books, right? You're giving birth to stories. And I think there's such beauty in that. So I think that that's where we also have that commonality as well.
No, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I feel like the theme, despite the facts that we're a combination of YA and middle grade, despite the facts that our characters might all come from different diverse backgrounds, I think that the theme of all of our books is resilience. And so that's what we're here, I think, to talk about today, is to talk about how we're living in a time of great uncertainty and a lot of darkness, and so I think that we're all speaking as parents as well, right? We're all speaking as moms of kids who are going to be growing up in this crisis. And I would say that the one thing that has been so amazing to me about how our world has shifted in the past couple of months is that so many people are doing check-ins these days. So many people are doing, check-ins of their others and are thinking a little bit more outside of themselves. And I can't count how many times I'm a physician in real life. I'm a doctor, and another fun fact. So I'm a urologist, and Jessica Kim's husband is a urologist, and we just love it. It's insane. Anyways, that was a big diversion, but so in real life, I'm a doctor. And so, I'm doing a lot of my conversations with my patients now by telehealth. And so I'll call them and I'll be like, hi, this is Dr. Wong. And like, one of the first things they always say is, are you okay, Dr. Wong? Like, they're asking me.
Yes.
And I think part of it is like, some people have actually read about like my book in like newspapers and things like, or magazines. And a lot of them are coming to me because they never thought to ask about my mental health. Like it never occurred to them. Like I actually had one patient who wrote me this long missive, like Dr. Wong, I didn't know you were one of us. Like, so one of us, people who suffer from anxiety and depression. And like another one, like I was talking to her about, her overactive bladder, and she was like, oh yes, Dr. Wong, I saw your thing in the magazine, and like, yeah, I've been on antidepressants for years. And it was like, oh my gosh, I mean, but the bottom line is that they feel, not only because of that, but I think in general, all my patients are asking more about other people. They are thinking about themselves. And the focus on mental health, the fact that, David Brooks of the New York Times is like soliciting all these things. It's like in the forefront that people are realizing that there's a whole spectrum of mental illness. And, depression doesn't have to make the news only when a celebrity dies by suicide. We can talk about all the layers of anxiety and stress leading up to that. And so I think that's what all of our books talk about. Yeah, for sure. I talked for a long time, so.
No, that's okay. I didn't want to interrupt or jump in if Jessica had something to say. But I don't know if I'm in grad school, actually down at Point Loma. I was super excited to hopefully come down and then see all my buddies from Point Loma. But it's 100% online, and it's my second master's in kinesiology with a focus on integrative wellness. And so a lot of what we're focusing on is the holistic view of health and wellness, not just from a disease perspective, but also from the perspective that people who have illness can orient themselves toward wellness and toward stress resilience, right? And so a lot of what you're talking about, that's been at the forefront of my mind over the past year that I've been in this program, and to see, the LA Times having headlines on mental health, the need for mental health resources, there was just a great New Yorker piece. It was a short 6-minute video. It's the crisis text line, I believe it's what it's called. And they were interviewing the founder and the data analyst about the uptick in people texting. You can live text 741-741 to talk to a counselor. There's obviously, we need to pay attention to those statistics, but also the fact that people are feeling, they're self-reporting their anxiety, they're becoming more aware, and they're becoming more aware of what the coping mechanisms are, right? So I started a group on Facebook. Anyone can join if you want to come, but we do a daily check-in, right? It's pro-social gathering. Every day we do a check-in, and it's, gratitude posts and things like that, because I need it. Like I was getting a little tired myself of, I have to post that and ask what people are doing. And then I was thinking, well, maybe I'll end that where I'll kind of settled in and say, wait a minute, I need to check in. I need to take those moments to breathe and to have gratitude and to set a routine and to see how everyone else is doing. I love knowing everyone else is doing well. It's beautiful.
I think what's interesting about this time is it's finally okay to talk about your anxiety. Like, it's normalized, everyone's feeling it. And so it's kind of assumed that everyone's, feeling the anxiety. And so I just imagine all the people who have dealt quietly with anxiety, inwardly or maybe undiagnosed. It's kind of like this permission. So my main character is only 11 years old, and she deals with some anxiety. And I think the whole premise of her taking on this double life is that she has permission to kind of be this person she's always wanted to be, to escape and leave her anxiety behind and kind of be this unself-conscious person that she's always wanted to be. And so, there's some silver linings in this whole sheltering in this, difficult time. And I think hopefully we'll start talking about mental illness a little bit more openly across all ages, across, all the borders. I think it's something that a lot of us deal with and should be talking about, just like we talk about our regular health.
Exactly. Kathy, what you're saying about the intersection between, I actually think, so people talked a lot about, just did a talk, and Jason Reynolds asked me about the language about how why we say death by suicide now instead of committing suicide. And obviously it has to do with not, placing blame on the person who died, or saying that, implying that it was a choice. And so, I said, in general, that the language around mental health is so stigmatized, and even the term mental illness, mental health is kind of a misnomer, because mental health affects your physical health. It causes heart palpitations, it causes, sweating, all the autonomic, the not intentional parts of your nervous system. And it's so funny. It was it's chemistry, it's brain chemistry. And the irony is that even I, as a doctor, didn't realize that until well after medical school. I'm pretty open that, in the very first chapter in this book, it's someone looking at a bottle of pills, and I reassure you that it's going to be a happy story, so you shouldn't be alarmed. But my relationship with medication has always been very complicated, in that I've always felt like it was, I've always wanted to get off of them. I always felt like it was such a weakness, and it wasn't until the third, I'd gone off of them twice. And then during a therapy session when I was in my research year in residency, Jess. So that year where you're cut off from everybody, and you're in basements decapitating rats and everything like that.
Oh, geez.
You're I was so clinically depressed, so sluggish. And, you know, my therapist was just like, you want to be on medication? I was like, yeah, but like, I don't know. I just feel, I don't want to be dependent on them. And she's like, why are you saying this? Like, your brain needs serotonin. You know, you wouldn't deprive a diabetic patient of insulin, you know, and that, like, it was like a light bulb went off. And it took me 30 years to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, went through medical school, you know, went through internship, you know, understood the medicine, the medical aspect of it, but didn't feel safe applying it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of why one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book.
Yeah, it took me years to accept it. Even after my dad passed away, I remember people saying to go to a therapist. And, you know, I think I remember my mom saying, actually, don't tell anyone if you go, because you don't want anyone at work to know. I teach at a community college locally, and we used to have, you were talking about the vocabulary, right? And just a few years ago, they changed all of our students have access to free counseling if they're enrolled. And so they changed it from psychological counseling to personal counseling to destigmatize that department. And I had students who came to me, because I'm an English teacher, and we love our English teachers. We're, you know, touchy-feely people. And so they always would come in, and it would sort of go into therapy mode. And I'd say, you know, this isn't my scope of practice. This isn't what I'm trained to do. You know, we have free psych services is what it was called. And my students over and over again would say, oh, no. If my parents found out, they would kill me. Mm. And even though that's an exaggerated term, there's such weight to that metaphorical threat, right? Because it's a spiritual kind of threat of, you know, if somebody found out, it would be the end. And I'm just so, I've witnessed the shift even over the past 5 years of not only the vocabulary, but then students coming in and me referring to them to services, to personal counseling, and them going, and understanding. Even the statistics say of the, you know, the younger generations are more apt to go seek services. So I'm so happy for that shift. Mm-hmm. But it is, we are all, you know, weighed down by a history of stigma, for sure.
I wanted to say something and I completely forgot it. So we can, if you want, we do have some comments and questions already. And one of them is to me, but I'm going to make it more general. So Eileen, what is it like to be a doctor who writes, and how do you balance the two? And I think that it's just the same for a doctor who writes as with anyone who does any other job other than writing. And goes back to writing. I think that the hardest job in the world is to be a stay-at-home mom. I mean, because trust me, every parent in America now realizes how hard it is to teach and to homeschool kids. So I think in general, to balance these lives, you have to just carve out the time. And for me, I actually write better when I'm really busy, because I remember, like, before I started my job here, I had like a couple of months beforehand, and I always like, oh, I should write, but like I always ended up like doing something with the house, or, you know, like space times just to fill, work expands to fill the space allotted to it. And so when I had all that time, I would like futz over like 1 or 2 sentences, you know, I would like plot, like try to outline or do research. But, you know, when I was at my busiest, like, when I was writing this, you know, I was working full time. I had the kids, and so after the kids went to bed, from 10 to midnight every day, I wrote no matter what. And knowing that I only had that time allowed me to bypass all the stuff in my head, all the anxieties. You know, it also helped that I was under contract and on deadline, and that's a huge thing, and that's something that not everyone has. And I wouldn't actually recommend it, especially if it's your first novel, because you want to have some time to marinate, but you also want to dedicate a specific time every day. It doesn't matter how long it is. Doesn't have to be the whole day. It doesn't have to be 4 hours. It can be 1 hour. You know, if you write 250 to 100 to 500 words a day every day for a year, you're going to end up with a book.
I'll go. So I am a stay-at-home mother. I have a a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old daughter. So normally when they're in school, long time ago, remember that? They used to go to school. That would be my writing time. So I would drop them off and then I would go straight to a cafe, put on the noise canceling headphones, and then I would just bang it out. So that was my process with my first book. That's how most of it got written. Of course, now I'm writing the second one now. I'm in drafting mode now, which is a little trickier because they're home. So I'm having to carve out some time. And, you know, the hardest part for me was taking myself seriously as a writer. I think and it could be upbringing, it could be the way I've been raised to see creative arts. But the hardest part was to ask and take that time, especially because I had been a stay-at-home mother for so long. I initially was treating it like a little hobby, you know, like, oh, I'll do it when the kids are gone. I'll do it on the edge when you know, it won't interfere with anyone's time. But as we all know, especially when you get close to publication or when you're banging out things on deadline, it gets a lot more demanding than I ever thought. And so, especially my husband's a surgeon, like Eileen, and so he works very long and hard hours. And so for me to ask him, hey, I know you worked 100 hours this week, but can you take the kids this weekend? I have this writing thing. It was a lot to ask. And I didn't think, it took me a while to own that I deserved it and needed it. If I was going to pharmacy school, if I was going to, you know, what other kind of endeavor, I wouldn't feel as bad. But because it was like kind of like a creative thing that, you know, maybe wasn't going to make very much money ever, you know, like I kind of downgraded it in my mind. And it wasn't until I took it seriously and felt like, okay, this is really truly what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to pursue. Like, I'm going to spend the money that I need to go to the conferences I want to go to. I'm going to go to the critique groups. And it was a big ask and a big sacrifice for my family. But now that we're here and the book's out, like, I feel like it was like a joint effort. And I feel like it was something we all owned and they all had a part in. And so, yeah, I think just psychologically being able to own that this is something I'm serious about was probably the biggest hurdle for me. But once I got over that and everyone was on board, everyone was super supportive, more supportive than I ever imagined, it became less of a, you know, thing where I had to balance. It was just kind of what mom was working on. Yeah. I mean, definitely there were moments, like, don't get me wrong, like, but my daughters are still kids. And I remember they were bummed. We were supposed to go somewhere together and I couldn't go because I had this critique group thing. And they were just like, how long are you going to do this? You know, like what, you know, when are you going to stop missing out on stuff? And I told her, I looked her like right in the eyes and I said,
I've heard on that.
This is mommy's dream. Do you want me to give up my dream? And she was like, oh, like, I think she was like 8 or 9. I was like, this is what I have to do to get to my dream. It's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work, but like, are you going to support me? You know? And so kind of putting her in a stakeholder position really helped, even as a young child.
Because you want her to achieve her dreams too. I remember at a certain point, right? Like part of what prompted me to want to write was my mom always thought she could be a lawyer and she could have been a writer, and so she didn't get the chance to do that. And so there was a point after she passed away where I thought, okay, my secret dream was always to be a writer. So I don't want my daughter to grow up and say, oh, my mom always said she would have liked to. Like, now's the time for me to try it and see. And, you know, it was so good for her. And I think it still is, you know, she sees me in grad school and she sees that I work hard and I love it. It's not just doing it to do it, but it's a dream, right? It's to be able to do it. And so that modeling is just, it's amazing.
And giving permission, like I think we didn't have, right?
Right.
Yeah. You've talked about, I think in a couple of interviews, Jess, that how you just didn't feel like I did that writing was a legitimate pursuit to follow. And
I didn't know any writers growing up. Like, who does that? Like, that's what white people do. Like, I don't know any people with immigrant Asian parents who are writers, like, unless they were like nonfiction writers or journalists or something, but definitely not anyone doing what we're doing now. So it was almost like, I want to be a Power Ranger when I grow up. I mean, like, it was like so not in my world at all. that
You just be like, I want to be in the NBA. It's like,
right. Oh, I want to be astronaut. Like I want to be. It just seems so out of my orbit. But from the very beginning when I did decide, because I always had the desire, Kathy, just like you, to be. It was my secret dream. I literally Googled like how to become a author, and I had to I did not know the first place to begin. And so it was definitely a journey, but one that I had to. I think at one point I was maybe waiting for someone to hand it to me on a silver platter, and as you know, medical school, residency, fellowship, it's not really like my spouse was in a position to be like, Jess, what are your hopes and dreams? Like, what steps are you taking to, go there? I had to do it for myself, and I think that's when it became mine and it became real. And then that's when I started to push myself and dream really big and go for it. So yeah, that was a really long answer. I'm sorry.
That's amazing.
We have another question. What was the hardest part about writing your book, and what was the funnest? So my answer to that would definitely tie in with the next question: with what kind of research did you do for your book? So one of the decisions I made really early on in this book was to write from dual narrative, because I felt like I really wanted to write a story where there were two people who both have some form of mental illness, because like more and more, like the statistics are, there are going to be those types of couples. And how do those people manage their neuroses? Like, is the anxious person always concerned that the other person, always concerned about everything the other person doing? And is the depressed person only thinking that the other person's just like with them like for selfish reasons? Like there's so many ways your mind can play with reality whenever you're dealing with a mental illness. And I definitely wanted to show how like the characters can view one instance from multiple points of view, and how they can see, like they can both live through the same event, and one person will think, oh, that's great, that's awesome, and the other will be like, that was the worst thing ever, and not for obvious reasons. And so I knew really early on that I wanted to do a point of view, and Jocelyn was going to be basically me, an Asian American girl growing up in Central New York. But the other character, I decided really early on that I wanted to be a person of color as well, because obviously talking about mental illness in the context of immigrant communities is really important to me. And so I wrote a character that was mixed race Nigerian, and obviously that's not my identity, and it was really, really important for me to do that responsibly. And I'll be honest, there's during the proposal phase, there was at least one editor who was like, would you want to just make him white? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And there's always the doubt that you're not going to do justice to that, that I'll never be able to do justice to that identity. But when you ask what the funnest part about the book, the funnest part of any book is when people read it, and people are like, I see myself in that, or like, thank you for showing me something that I've never seen in a book before. And the absolute best moment of the entire last 2 years was when I had my first male Nigerian reader, just like spooge over the internet, like over how much he
Awesome.
like I got it right. That was absolutely, it's just like, oh, thank God, first of all, but also, that's why we do it. That's why we write. That's why we go to bookstore events, because bookstores are a way like no other for authors to connect with their readers. I miss seeing people's faces in the audience when we say these things. I love seeing your faces, but like, there's no, it's like crystal meth for authors, basically. So, I guess it's good that you guys aren't feeding our addiction.
It's true. But in terms of, it's funny because in terms of my writing history, I spent about 4 years writing a book that no one will ever read. And then How to Be Brave poured out of me in about total, it was broken up by my semester, but it was total about 3 months.
Wow.
Not including revision, but it was that like, it was 20 years of everything, just whew, it just poured out of me, and it felt very natural. And then similar to what you were talking about being on contract, it was a 2-book deal, and I had to finish that second book within 6-7 months or so.
I'm on this timeline right now.
I said, okay, you need me to take 20 years of my life and do it again.
Right. But faster. Yeah.
Yeah. Back to a little bit of the mental health stuff. That's when I just went into full on overdrive in terms of anxiety. And also going back to what you were saying, I realized my husband's a physical therapist. He works a second job. I can feel like my writing is a second job. I also am now in grad school, things like that. And he's always been so supportive. But I had that moment where I realized I needed to ask and say, okay, you know, he comes home 2 times a week so that he could go to his other facility. And I said, I need 1 day a week, 6 hours. At that point, my daughter was smaller. So I said, you're putting her to bed, you know, you're doing dinner, you're doing all of that. And that's my second job. And I just need to go to a cafe. And I would go to work in the morning, and then I would go straight to that cafe, and I would write for a good 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that ask was really hard, right? But then ultimately, we knew it was going to be about 5 months till I had to do it. But that time period was so hard to be able to and I ended up being so proud of that book. And it is a book, my second book, The Best Possible Answer, is about how the narrator is dealing with anxiety specifically, because I was working it out on the page. Or whatever is happening now, that's what's going into this book right now. Yeah. But the most fun part of that book was it's set in Chicago at a particular area that was focused, you know, it was just meaningful to me. And I took my daughter there, and it's a pool in those of you near Chicago, Sandburg Village. And we kind of snuck in and looked around, and it was just that moment of like feeling the place so that I could bring the memories into it. But yeah, meeting readers, connecting with writers in the community, the best part of all of it. Absolute, the most fun.
That's awesome. For me, the hardest part was getting basically I wanted to write always from an Asian American point of view. So I wanted to play a lot with subverting stereotypes. So in my first initial draft, especially with the character of Yumi's mother, Mrs. Chung, I very much intentionally wrote her opposite to the way most Asian American women appear on the screen or in books, just in media in general. So normally a lot of, where you're used to a lot of tiger moms, cold, that kind of feel. And so I made her really gregarious and very, zany and kind of wacky, but it just wasn't really working. It didn't really feel authentic to me. It wasn't really kind of where I was going thematically. And so I think for me, I just wanted so much to overturn a stereotype that I was actually just writing against it, and it wasn't ringing true to me. And so I think I wrote Mrs. Chung maybe 3 or 4 times in revision. And finally I was like, you know what? She is a little tiger mommy in some ways, but it's just because that's the surface, she can still have some of those things where you think you know her, but then I'm going to take you deep, and you're going to go on the journey with her, and you're going to see why she thinks that way, what it's like to be an immigrant, how she loves her daughter just as fiercely as, a different kind of mom that you're more used to, but it's no different. It's just a different dialect of the same language. And so I went there with her, and that took several tries for me to get it right, but she's one of my favorite characters. As a mother of a tween, I can very much understand the fierceness of her love and how she would just give it all for her kids, yet her super high expectations and why they're there. I think I really wanted to go why are they there? Is she just being materialistic? She just wants the kids to go to these colleges so she could brag, because that's what Yumi thinks in the beginning of the story. But no, it's she has these lived experiences. She's lived in this world with full of racism and, not having been educated in this country. And she knows what the kids are going to be up against when they come of age, and she wants them to be fully equipped. And so they come from real places. And so I think as Yumi kind of delves into herself as a comedian, and also gets tangled up with her family in their drama with their failing Korean barbecue restaurant, they kind of can see each other for the first time. And that was really rewarding for me, to kind of try, many different ways, and then to kind of nail like, oh yeah, this is her, like this is what I want. The funnest part of writing, the funnest part, yeah, I think I would agree with you too, just meeting readers. That's the best, is just, Eileen's daughter, like a little while ago, like it was just, that's the best part, is having kids be excited to see themselves on the page, to connect with the story, in some way. So yeah.
So what kind of research did you do for your books? Can I think? Did you go to stand-up clubs like a lot, Jess?
I did virtually. I watched like untold hours of footage on YouTube of kids in comedy camp and what kind of activities they do.
Fun.
Yeah, all the improv stuff like that's taken straight from YouTube, like the kind of prompts and like the exercises. So yeah, I definitely it's really interesting to write comedy on the page, because comedians, half of their comedy is in their delivery, like the way they talk, like the cadence, and the way their faces and the way they hold the mic, like so much of that is part of it, but it's just words on a page. Like it's a very different kind of humor. So and also it's not like anecdotal or observational. Like you can write a funny book just with those things, but comedians have like an actual format, a hook, and punchline. Like there's an actual formula there that I had to learn. So yeah, I had to buy like the comedy Bible. I had to watch, take some lessons online and stuff. So
is the audio, you mentioned it's an audiobook too, right? Maybe that's like a really great natural way for people to listen to it, because I'll admit, when I read the part where Yumi does her first stand-up thing, and like the joke is lion cheetah, like I had to read it a couple times, like how is that funny, like, and it wasn't until I said it out loud
yeah, exactly. There's some stuff that work that way. Yeah,
it's like a zookeeper who like is like mad at his is playing Uno with his animals and says, I'm never gonna play Uno with you again, lion cheetah.
Yeah,
but like when you look at lion cheetah, like it doesn't, like it didn't make the connection in my head, so I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of people have been enjoying the audio quite a bit. I actually haven't heard it yet, just snippets.
I haven't even heard the audio for none of the book, and that was 5 years ago. That's how much I hate listening to my own work.
You did the audio?
Huh?
Someone else did my reading, so I don't.
Yeah,
Eileen, you did the audio on yours? Or no?
I've never listened to the audio on none of the above.
But they had you record.
No, I did not. No, but I just don't like hearing my word.
Well, it's funny, you said you were asking a question about research, and I'm like, wait, I'm thinking back to 2013, 2015 when I was writing the books, as I'm going back. Because I've been working on YA historicals, I can talk about research like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
with contemporaries, it's interesting because you're drawing from the world as you see it in the time, but you're also drawing from your experience. But then, like I'm half Greek, half Jewish. So my grandparents on my mom's side came from Russia, and the character in my second book was Russian Jewish, and her family, her mother, came in the 80s. And that was not my own personal experience. And so the research for her character was focused on I had to actually go and read a lot about the Jews who left Russia in the 80s, and then talk to people who I know. And it turns out there's a friend of mine, I don't know if he's watching right now, but there's a friend of mine who is from Chicago, we went to high school together, and he came and knocked on my classroom door over in Pasadena and just appeared. And we ended up talking for an hour. I hadn't seen him in years. And I was telling him about my book, and he said, well, that was me. I was one of the kids that was my lived experience. I was like, can I ask you questions? And so it ended up being such a wonderful moment. But it's interesting because the book that I've been working on is a YA historical set in the late 19th century. And that's a whole other world of research, right? That is just like deep diving, reading a ton of books. But contemporaries are a little different in that way, right? You're picking up pieces and things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, like, because when I was a child, the world was a different place. We didn't have phones, whatever. But then I'm also a mom of a child who is that age. So you got to kind of fuse, like,
It's like with contemporaries, it's a lot of the emotional research, I think, balanced with the details of the world that you're creating, which you want to be authentic to a time period, but also authentic to your own memories. Like it's an interesting writing experience to write a contemporary.
Yeah. Because there's so many identities outside of myself in this book. Like I did, like I said, have to do a lot of research, a lot of interviews, like going to people's houses and looking up Nigerian food, which is always like, we got to talk about food, okay? Yes. But one of the secondary characters is autistic, and what's so crazy about that is that the language like Asperger's doesn't exist anymore, like the language surrounding it and the whole idea of identity first language, like it was something that I really had to navigate, had to like also talk to people to see, because there are different camps within that community, and like having to do that. I did actually I had more per capita, I had more autistic readers than like any like Nigerian, or just because for the percentage that it is in the book, it was smaller, but like it was really important for me, and like that, and also I had to research how kids access mental health too, mental health treatment, and that's something that just wasn't really an option when I was a kid, and like I was like, so how do they actually do this in schools? How, like, does a parent need to be involved? What's the consent process when you start medications, things like that. It was really interesting. Yeah. All right, the next question is, what is your favorite line or scene from your book?
Oh, okay, I've got one. So it's actually reminds me a little bit of what you're talking about, Kathy, about your parents. So I lost my father to cancer at the age of 7. So I was really young. So I didn't really grow up, beyond 7, obviously, with a father figure. So it was actually really difficult for me to write like a family with both parents, because it was a lot of like extrapolating. But there's this scene. I don't have very many memories of my father, but there's this scene in Stand Up Yumi Chung where Yumi goes out. It's kind of like a dark night of the soul kind of thing, where they kind of had this restaurant event that didn't go their way, and they're really worried about the future of their restaurant. And Yumi's like taking out the trash, and she goes outside and she smells cigarette smoke, and she sees her father sitting on an upturned milk carton smoking a cigarette, and she knows immediately that he must be feeling really sad or stressed, because the only time he smokes is when he's feeling that way. And that actually comes from like one of the few memories I have of my father. We used to own a produce store. My father graduated from Seoul National University with a degree in pharmacy, but when he immigrated here, he served in the US Army, and he started his own business about an hour in a small suburb outside of LA, working 7 days a week, like, schlepping vegetables and Asian goods in a little market. And I remember it was a stressful life. Even as a child, as an empathetic child, I could kind of sense, when things were stressful, and he would go and he would smoke a cigarette. And I was just so glad I could include that moment in the book. And that's actually a scene that a lot of readers have mentioned to me as being the part where they cried. And I think it comes from that very like raw place, that memory that I have of my father. So that's my favorite scene. Yeah, favorite and most difficult to write scene. Yeah.
How about you, Kathy? I'm still thinking.
I know. I think I had fun writing the scenes where Georgia's ticking off the things on like skinny dipping and and things like that, where it was fun to write those. But in terms of the ones that carry most meaning for me, I think it was the ones where Georgia is in conversation with her dad, and similar. Maybe this will bridge us to food as well, but my parents owned a restaurant in Chicago, Greek-owned restaurant downtown Chicago. And the scene where she comes home, it's towards the beginning of the book, but where she comes, I never went home. We went to the restaurant, but home, I didn't go home till like 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I was close to the restaurant, and then you go home. Maybe home on the weekends sometimes, but we usually go to the restaurant to have our steak dinner in the restaurant. And so that scene where there's a scene where she sits down in the booth, and the only way he can really communicate is through food. And so he puts a plate of spaghetti in front of her and asks her about school, and she doesn't really know how to talk to him. And that felt like the most honest, where I remember that feeling. And he had like a made up history of the influence of the Greeks in America that, he always said this, my dad actually said this, that Benjamin Franklin wanted Greek as the language, which turned out it wasn't true. And Georgia knows this isn't true. It's just this, they like to tell about the origins and that the secret ingredient in the spaghetti was cinnamon, and it still is, and I put cinnamon in everything. But that feeling that was in that scene when I was writing it felt the most special to me.
I love that.
Yeah. I would say that my favorite scene is also with a parent, but I don't want to talk about it because it's a little bit of a spoiler. Jessica, it is kind of, I want to do the exact same thing you did want to do about subverting that stereotype, and it doesn't mean that people can't have stereotypical characteristics, but they can still surprise you at the end.
Yes, or have more dimension.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I try to do with both of them, my parents, but especially the mother. The mother is a very, very key role. I mean, she actually doesn't have that much of a personality per se, but like the role that she plays is important. And so I'm not going to spoil that, but I would say that maybe my favorite line is there's this scene where Jocelyn's getting ready for a date. And so she's with her BFF Priya. And then like, she was like, oh, I feel just like Constance Wu, like in Crazy Rich Asians, like trying on dresses, except I get my dresses at Kmart. And so it's like, we're crazy poor Asians. And so that's one of my favorite lines.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So then what are I'm gonna save the current reads for the end so that we can plug books for everyone to buy at Mysterious Galaxy, because
yes,
books through Mysterious Galaxy, because they need to be there so I can be there, go to San Diego and do a book event this fall. Okay, so we'll save that to the end. Oh, this is a good one. If you could describe your book as a dish, what dish would it be?
I just had Chicago pizza for dinner because my childhood best friend lives in Chicago, and there's a Gino's East that opens in LA, so I'm now plugging them. But she just dropped off a Gino's East pizza, and it was and I can't remember if Georgia eats Gino's East. I should probably go with the spaghetti with the cinnamon. But any food from Chicago, really.
Awesome. For me, okay, I would do like a kimchi taco. And the reason why I would choose that is because my main character, Yumi Chung, is a second generation American like me. So that means she was born and raised in America, and her parents are immigrants. So you don't get a lot of those characters in books. Usually, if you do get somebody from Korea, it's someone who had just come over as an immigrant themselves. So it's a slightly different identity. And I think, while she is kind of toggling between her two worlds, like she is equally American as she is Korean. And though phenotypically you may not see that, culturally very much so, like she is both. And I think sometimes she doesn't know where she fits in, but she realizes that it's enough. Like it is who she is. And I think that would be, I had an experience once when I was at a signing, and there were some, I think, librarians, it was for ARCs that we were signing, and they're free, right? Like you're signing the book and you're giving it to them and whatever. And I said, oh, she was at my table. I said, oh, would you like a copy of my book? And she said, like we don't have that many Asian kids at our school, so like yeah. She just kind of declined, and I was like, oh, you think
that's when you're like, okay, and how many hobbits do you have? How many vampires are there in your school?
Right.
Like I mean,
I was just very jarred because this was a very It's a very American book too. Yes, it's got a lot of Korean stuff in it, but she's an American child having, so I don't know. It just made me think like people probably just think it's like kimchi and that's it, but no, it's a kimchi taco. Like she is both. Like she's very LA, like she's an LA girl. She loves Marvel comics. Like she's, like she is both. She is both of those.
That's kind of, so Kathy and I were both on the We Need Diverse Books team. And so
Right.
That's really depressing to me that even after We Need Diverse Books, people are still saying that.
This was in Monterey Park, California, Southern California, 2019. Okay. So it was like not, anywhere where that's not common. It was a very diverse area.
I was gonna say she doesn't really know her area either.
I know, Monterey Park. Hello.
Okay.
But regardless, even if she didn't, she should be bringing your book to those kids.
Yeah.
But this is for any kid. I
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need to do a We Need Diverse Books 101 for her, and
like, you don't have shy kids at your school?
Windows, mirrors, kids don't only need kids don't only need mirrors of who they are. They need windows that they can, and windows that they can look through, and doors that they can open and walk through this is a global society. We are in a global pandemic. If people are not exposing their kids to all aspects of the world, and they are doing a disservice in raising them. But
I just was really surprised by how she could see this book and think it's only going to apply to one kind of kid, but it's like, it's anyway. I can go on and on, but I will stop.
Oh, okay. Whole other panel, okay? All right.
Whole other panel.
We're going to do it. So it's okay if we go more than an hour, right? Is it okay for you guys if we go more than an hour, because we're running against the time? But
I can stay for a little bit. We've got a BTS concert at 8:00, but I can hang out for a little bit. It's a virtual concert. We're not going to a real concert. It's on YouTube, but my daughters were all dressed up downstairs.
Oh, that's so cute. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. Well then, for people who love learning and experiencing other cultures and participating in them, do you have any advice for them in being able to learn and love new cultures without culturally appropriating? I think that the immediate answer is you can talk about other people's cultures, but you have to give credit where it's due. Like you can't. You can pay homage to it, and. But like also discuss the context, it's a deep thing, because cultural appropriation is one of those, it's like pornography, when you see it. We can go back.
I'm just thinking about in terms of if this is in the context of writing or generally, but it has to do with part of what we were talking about the process before, and a lot of what we talked about at the We Need Diverse Books weekend workshop that we attended is doing deep research, really talking to people, and having a lot of sensitivity readers, right? As you were saying, which really doing the hard work of understanding history, understanding context, understanding, and really reflecting on why is it that you would feel the need to make this choice if you're talking about your own art, right?
Yeah, and why is that a story that only you can tell?
It's a big question.
It is. It's a big question. Again, another panel. Okay, we'll mark that down for the next Mysterious Galaxy.
Yes. We have opinions on that.
Since we're talking about your parents, what do your parents think about your books and you being an author?
So I actually didn't tell them for a very long time that I was writing. It was like kind of like what Yumi does. She does it like on the down low, because she just doesn't. It's like her own little thing, and she doesn't think anything's gonna kind of come of it. And I very much had those same feelings. I didn't tell my in-laws either. So it wasn't until I think I signed with an agent and things started kind of picking up. I think when the book sold, and then It was a huge moment for me. I think after I signed with my agent, my mom said something about, oh, maybe you'll be the Korean J.K. Rowling. And then we just laughed it off. And then I got in the car, and my husband and I were going to Las Vegas on a trip, and I just started crying. Broke down because I think I had trained my mind to say, I don't need anyone to validate me. This is what I want to do. And I understand that not everyone will get it. And I probably don't expect that generation to kind of understand what I'm doing. But the fact that there was a little bit of that, like, I'm proud of you, it just meant the world to me. So there was a little teeny bit of like, oh, well, why weren't you proud before the book deal? Like, there was a minute of that, but you know, it's complicated, but yeah, no, it was nice. Yeah. How about you guys?
My parents kind of know about it, but I think that they still see it as a smaller part of my identity than my doctor identity.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
Which is fine. I'm like, I don't feel like I need their validation on it. But I mean, it's interesting that this is really my book is really my coming out story for having depression for my family. Like it's nothing that we ever still really even talk about. Mm-hmm. So in that way, I hope that it just puts our relationship in more of a context. But it's really funny how many people I know, not just my patients, but like my best friend from college, didn't realize what I went through in college. You know, it's just amazing how, you know, it can feel so disastrous and so all-encompassing for you, but you can still hide it
and be functional.
Yeah, you can still, and not to hide it, but not want to mention it to people because you don't want to seem weak. Because I don't want my staff to like think, oh, Dr. Wong's off her rocker, you know, and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. What about you, Kathy?
Well, I mean, my parents have both passed, but I had a similar situation as you, Jessie, where I was a secret writer forever. I didn't actually take my first creative writing class until I was 25, and only 3 people knew about it: my mom, my best friend, and my husband. And then I didn't tell anyone I was writing the book until I signed with my agent. And I announced it on Facebook, as one does, years ago. And everyone was like, wait, you're a writer?
Yeah, exactly.
But my mom's sister is still alive. She's 90. I don't know if she's watching now. Maybe she is.
Wow.
I'm not going to say 90 blah 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 years old. Her birthday's in a few weeks. And I get atta girls from her all the time.
Oh, that's the best.
Atta girls. So that's been the love. And then, you know, my other family has been really supportive. But it always feels exposing, right? You're like, and then they say, well, is that you in the book? Yes and no.
Or is that me in the book? You know, it's probably more.
It is me, but it's not. I didn't do that. I did that. You know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I guess I just didn't want to tell them, because then I don't think people in my community realize how long it takes to write a book, how long or how many things can go wrong where that book doesn't actually happen. And I didn't want them to, well, they, you know, ask every time, every Thanksgiving, when's that book coming out? When's that book? Because it did take a while, you know, so I think it was just too much stress.
Yeah. Oh, so I don't want to keep you from your BTS concert. So just answer really quickly. Comfort reads. So I've got a bunch because I feel like what I've been doing this month is profiling Asian American authors, just to sort of make sure that there's a representation in the children's literature world, so that, you know, kids can associate Asian Americans with things other than COVID. And one of the ones I loved recently is Drawn Together by Min Lei, which is a book about
I love that.
the power of being able to communicate without words. Intergenerational, intercultural. Oh, such an amazing book. Susan Tan, Solo Lee Jenkins. This is like the new Ramona Quimby. It is so adorable. My daughter loved it as well. Just voice and family and love, just comfort books. And anything by Stacey Lee is going to be amazing, because it's going to be transportive and take you to a historical world that you didn't realize was so relevant to your own. Wise, lyrical, fun, everything. So, okay. And buy links for all of our books are back in the Facebook feed. If you go back to the Facebook page, please buy our books, not for us, but to support Mysterious Galaxy mostly. Trust me, they and our publisher get a lot more than we do. So support them, because without them, we wouldn't be writers.
That's right. All right, I've got a few just because I got to run. Of course, we all know Jason Reynolds. I read this a few times a year. He's the best. It's such a
I have
fun.
it here too.
Yay! This is a new one, Blackbird Girls. And it's actually, I don't read a whole lot of historical. Sorry, Kathy, but but this one I actually really loved.
Who's it by?
Oh, Anne Blankman.
Okay.
It's following the
That's wonderful.
Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So right around that time, it was just lovely friendship story, like enemies to friends kind of friendship story. If you want to laugh, Insignificant Life of a Cactus, Dusty Bowling's one of my favorites, about a girl born with no arms, but handled in a really respectful and funny and very human way. This is San Diego author, Sally J. Pla. She wrote Someday Birds, and it's like such a fun road trip story told from the perspective of a neurodiverse boy who's kind of going through things with his father, who's fighting for his life on the other side of the country. So they take this wild road trip to kind of be there for him. That's me.
So we're, I'm lifting the veil. We're bedside. So I was like, oh, what do I have on my bedside? So I grabbed, because it's we're in quarantine, and I'm like, I should read the book that I've never read. I have like,
oh yeah,
comfort read, really?
That I'm reading Yoga Anatomy, and I'm reading We Used to Be Friends by Amy Spaulding. She's local, a friend of mine, so good. And she usually does rom-coms, and this is a friendship breakup story.
Oh,
Wow.
And then another one that I'll recommend, I've been reading for a while. I'm halfway through, and you can read them like page by page, and you want to savor them, is The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. I don't know if either of you have read it. It's beautiful. So that's what's actually in my pile right now.
nice.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. And if you get a book through Mysterious Galaxy, we can't sign them physically, but we can sign book plates and mail them to you. My daughter has one from Jess, and it's adorable. So we need to do that. Thank you so much for coming.
Congratulations on your book. Thanks for letting us stream with you. We're so excited.